Welcome back, and today we're going to talk about Cannonball and the Big Bell Global Series when it first came out, and an eye-opening innovation that they did that didn't realize how it affected the tone. So back when the first model came out, I borrowed one and compared it against a Yamaha 875. The tone itself was similar to the Yamaha, though the 875 was more complex. The Cannonball's key work was pretty good, although the key rods were thinner than the 875 and a bit more flexy. The key work smoothness was really good, but the important part at the time is that it was actually $1,500 less than the Yamaha 875. I think the price was something like $1,200 versus $2,700. This is when it first came out. So I bought one, played it, loved it, but I sold it after a few years when I replaced it with a Selmer horn. But more importantly, back then, Cannonball's website had a video, which I spent a couple weeks kind of looking for it on and off, but I wasn't able to find it. In that video, it showed one of their techs on what they do to the inside of the neck. So we're talking about in here, inside the tendon part of the neck. What they basically did is they provide two necks for each horn. One of them has this modification, the other one doesn't. Is they used a heavy wire brush which was attached to a bench motor, and they basically scraped the inside of the neck to create a texture in it. This disrupts the sound wave reflecting through the neck, and it essentially interrupts the higher partials, and in the end result creates a darker tone versus a neck that wasn't modified. Of course, this also has a lot to do with the player's characteristics. I mean, if you pinched or had a jazz mouthpiece, you probably won't hear too much of a difference. But myself, I usually play darker mouthpieces, and I hear more complex tones and a wider range of tones and horns. So to me, I can hear these differences more readily than probably many people. But you've probably seen pictures of Selmer hand hammering necks, body tubes, etc. in the older days. And more modern techniques, they use hydroforming for necks, using fluid pressure to expand it to a particular shape. And when they hydroform it, the inside is really smooth. Now, when I first came about this with the Cannonball in the early 2000s, I wanted to buy two necks of the same brand that were hydroformed and then do the same thing Cannonball did, but I never got around to it. But if you take a look at any, for instance, Selmer neck or the better Yamaha necks, you can actually feel a texture on the inside. And I never really realized how that impacted the tone until I see the Cannonball video. Anyways, if you have a Cannonball, please take a look at the inside of your neck, feel it. Now be careful though, because mine was actually really sharp feeling because I used a wire brush and it made sharp edges on it. So be careful when you feel the inside of the neck. But I get the same thing in my other necks, my other horns, for instance. So this is a factory gold-plated tenor neck, and you can just feel the inside. You can feel the seam, and you can feel the texture on the inside of the neck. Here's a silver-plated one. Once again, same thing. You feel the texture in the neck is not perfectly smooth. Here's a couple of necks. Here's a 6 neck, which I think those tenors were. Same thing. Texture on the inside. This is a burnished 7 neck. Same thing. So there's always a texture inside. And the question is, how does that texture affect things? But there's many things that affect the playability of a neck. One is the size of the opening up front. The smaller it is, the more center tone is a result of it. And the larger it is, the more free blowing it is. But also, the pip has an impact on how free blowing it is too. Some pips have a longer tube on the bottom, which of course blocks that airflow, making it more resistant. And then usually the end part, if it's for the same horns, they're usually all the same size. Otherwise, it wouldn't fit, of course. I would also like to add that many things inside a horn, texture-wise, or anything that can impact the tone is there. For instance, if you have a horn that hasn't been cleaned in many, many years, or you may have heard stories where someone takes the horn in for cleaning and they clean out the inside of the body tube because the owner said it'll kind of look, you get a lot of green stuff and other things down there, is it cleans that out and affects the reflectivity of the sound waves. They may get absorbed, they may get refracted in different ways, and it can affect the tone. And this is essentially what the texture does inside the neck, is it doesn't allow a perfect reflection of the sound waves. Anyways, take a look at your neck, whether it's a Cannonball, a more modern Cannonball, or the Big Bell Global series. I had the original one, just a regular lacquer one that came with two necks, a lacquer and a silver plated one. And one of them had the roughened up inside. But take a look at your horn, whether it's a Cannonball, or a Selmer, or Selmer USA, or Yamaha, Buffet, any brand out there really. And put in the comments if the inside of your neck is textured. And if you have an original Cannonball Big Bell Global series with two necks, check one versus the other and comment down below what you see. Alright, that's all for today. One of the innovations that Cannonball did back in the early 2000s. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you later.